Good morning, everyone. I'll tell you, I am so excited to be here today. Somebody asked last night, we were out to dinner, a bunch of folks, if this was a high point for Stand Together, getting this group together. And the answer to that question is absolutely yes, this is a high point for Stand Together. But most importantly, because I think it can be a high point, and I'm not exaggerating here, I think this can be a high point for our country. Because in this room, I look out and I see amazing social entrepreneurs, organizations, individuals that are absolutely doing amazing things, transforming lives. I see influencers, I see philanthropists and folks that work at foundations that are helping to support these efforts. I see people that can drive change in people's lives and drive change in our country. And so it is a truly exciting day for us to come together and hit a few key themes that this group right here assembled can work together on to change the future of people's lives and the future of the country. And so we think about those things that stand together in the nature of transformation. So I want you to think today, this is probably the most important thing I'll say during my initial talks here. I want you to think about transformation for this entire couple of days that we're spending together. I want you to think about the nature of transformation in people's lives. I want you to think about what that transformation in people's lives can accomplish at a broad scale. I want to think about how to find it, where to find it, how to work together to drive it, and where we should be looking for it as we seek to make this a much bigger movement in our country, across the country. So I wanted to start off by sort of getting us in the mood by thinking about the nature of personal transformation and what drives it, and then start to sort of tee up the day for what you're going to hear today and the day tomorrow as well. So a quick story. One of my good friends is a guy named Anton Lucky. Anton Lucky, born in South Dallas, tough background. His dad goes to prison when he's an infant. And so Anton, growing up, he's a really smart kid, loved bringing home straight A's to his grandparents, who were really helping to raise him at the time. But it turns out in his community, getting good grades wasn't actually the cool thing to do, right? So he starts getting picked on. One of the big rival gangs, the Crips, starts picking on him. And Anton, smart kid, gets together with his cousins and says, well, what can we do? And enterprising young guy watches a movie that the big rival gang for the Crips was the Bloods. There were no Bloods in Dallas. Anton says, we're going to start the Bloods in Dallas. We're going to start the Bloods. So by the age of 19, Anton is the leader of the Bloods. It's growing pretty quickly. It's of course the largest gang in Dallas. So Anton is growing the Bloods. He's not thinking anything of the fact that he's now getting involved in some pretty troubling things. And eventually he gets sentenced to prison. And when the judge sentences him, he says, you are a menace to society. At that moment, Anton all of a sudden, I'm not a menace to society. And it kind of starts to set in that his life's on the wrong path. Goes to prison, and while he's there, he's a leader in prison, right? Folks are coming up to him saying, I'm doing this for you on the outside, I'm doing that for you. He's getting more and more trouble. An older gentleman in prison pulls Anton aside. And I'm now quoting Anton when I say this. He says, young brother, you're a leader. And Anton said, well, that's something I've never heard before. He says, you're a leader. If you have the power to lead these men to do wrong, you have the power to lead them to do right. So Anton, at that moment, dedicated his life to changing it and being a leader. That was his first step of personal transformation, a mindset shift that he could be a leader to doing right rather than wrong, right? That's the beginning of Anton's transformation. He starts reading, he starts fully developing those capabilities, starts thinking incessantly about what he's going to do when he gets out to lead people to do right rather than doing wrong. Anton gets out of prison, finds Bishop Omar Jawar. They start together a group called Urban Specialists that's now transforming the lives of thousands of kids that were stuck in gang violence, growing up in troubled backgrounds, having a difficult time in their life on the streets of South Dallas and the schools of South Dallas. You're going to get to hear from Bishop Omar tomorrow on one of the panels. It's one of the groups that we're working with that stand together, and they are transforming so many other lives. And here's the really key takeaway I want you to take from Anton's story. It's that his transformed life was a catalyst for broader social change, right? No one could have predicted when that guy pulled him aside in prison and said, you're a leader. No one could have predicted that that transformation would lead to the transformation of thousands of other lives. And frankly, we hope millions of lives over the course of over the coming years. No one could have predicted that. But we believe that every transformed life has a ripple effect. It starts with a productive employee, a healthy family, a better neighbor, right? But most importantly, it's this inspirational witness and testimony to change to others. And when we see individuals who've been transformed applying their unique gifts and talents to not only transform their lives, but transform the lives of others, we see inspirational change in our country. And I'll tell you, I could tell stories like Anton's all day long, because at Stand Together, we work with organizations that deliver that change every single day. The groups that you're going to hear from during this conference are absolutely inspirational. They are delivering that change at scale because they're doing things differently. And that's the second point that I do want to make sure that we think about as we think about the nature of transformation. We think about how personal transformation happens and that it's a catalyst for change. But we also have to think through the fact that it doesn't happen by doing things the way we've always done them. It doesn't happen because smart people sit in an office or even in a room like this and plan up strategies to try to go transform lives. It happens through entrepreneurship. It happens through innovation. It happens by thinking big and doing differently in the social sector. It requires us taking the same creativity, the same dogged focus on outcomes that we take in the business world. It requires in the social sector as well. So at Stand Together, we identify and cultivate organizations that are exhibiting what we call social entrepreneurship. They are delivering outcomes in people's lives in effective, novel, creative ways that are working. And instead of asking ourselves, well, what's the next program that we could fund or the next activity or how do we grow the inputs of an organization, we ask how do we come alongside folks that are demonstrating real success at a local level, on the ground, in people's lives, and how do we find more of it? How do we grow it? How do we support it in such a way that more people can see that change? What we found is that so many organizations are doing amazing things with some additional leadership development, connecting with other leaders that have knowledge and expertise to share, connecting with business leaders who are at the top of their industries, that there's an enormous opportunity to grow and scale what's working across the country. We work with some amazing novel and innovative solutions. I know Charles Hoke is in the room from Defy Ventures. It's a good example of one of the organizations that we work with. I recently had the chance to go to Pelican Bay Prison in Northern California. It's up on the Oregon border in California. It's the only supermax prison in California. It means most of the folks there, it's pretty notorious, most of the folks there are violent offenders who are in prison for a very long time. And I'll tell you, even with this job, even with my understanding of the moral dignity of every individual, the inherent human potential in every single individual, I'll admit to going to Pelican Bay and not knowing what to expect. Not necessarily believing that every person that I was going to meet with that day had the potential to transform their life and transform the lives of others and drive change in the country, even though that's what we talk about every day at Stand Together. But Defy Ventures takes the novel approach that so many incarcerated individuals are natural-born entrepreneurs who've used their natural gifts for illegitimate versus productive purposes. So they transform their hustle. It's a fun tagline. I like it a lot. They transform the hustle. And so when they transform the hustle, big things can happen. So it's an applied entrepreneurship program. They learn the values and character and skills that are required for entrepreneurship and creating value for others. And through the program, they get an MBA, an MBA certificate from Baylor University, and you see transformation happen. I'll tell you, there wasn't a single dry eye in the room at the graduation ceremony at Defy Ventures at Pelican Bay. And I met Angel, whose maintenance business was pretty viable. I met Michael, whose business, frankly, he could have been on Shark Tank on TV, and I would have absolutely believed it. These guys were so committed. I mean, they were throwing out terms like prime rates and opportunity cost, and they had learned the principles of business. And you started to understand and believe that nearly every single person has nearly unlimited potential to create value for others and drive change in our country. No one would have told me, well, the way to reduce recidivism and create change to rehabilitate someone with a criminal past, you would have never been able to convince me that the way to do it is to teach them how to start a business. That wouldn't have been my mental model. If I were going to sit in an ivory tower at an academic institution, or sit in the halls of Congress down the street, or stand together in our office and say, what's the solution to rehabilitating folks in prison, I would not have told you that Defy Ventures model was the one that was going to do it. But that's not how business works. Normally, it's not how philanthropy should work. We find what's working, and they're delivering, transform. Only 3% of their participants end up back in prison, compared to between 2/3 and 3/4 of the broader population, depending on whether you use 3 or 5 years as the metric. 95% of their offenders are employed post-release. It's just unreal. I could do this all day, by the way. You're going to hear 15 organizations throughout the course of the next couple of days. They're going to give inspiring speeches, far more eloquent than I, up here on the stage, that will absolutely blow you away, because they are social entrepreneurs delivering change in people's lives, and you're going to start to see the big picture together of what that can mean for our country. I couldn't be any more excited for that opportunity for each of us to hear and think about how we can be involved in some of that amazing work. Finally, I want to hit one last point, and that's where I see this change happening in transformed lives and transforming our country. It happens because of what exists today, right now, in communities across America. Everything we need to solve this country's toughest problems exists in our communities across the country. Every resource we need, every talent we need, every skill we need, every heart we need to drive change in this country exists right now in our communities. We've got some inspiring folks here that can be leaders in unearthing those resources. But each of them exists in our communities. You're going to hear this theme over and over again when you hear the folks that are going to be up on this stage. They're going to share stories of change where they are tapping in to the unique gifts and talents of members of the community to solve communities' problems. And that's ultimately what we're all about here at Stand Together. Because while we've got this big vision to identify, support, and scale social entrepreneurs that are delivering this transformative change, we have an even loftier vision of revitalizing communities in America, of revitalizing the civil society, a culture of mutual benefit where neighbors are helping others to drive change in their lives, improve the lives of everyone. And we want to remove whatever barriers those are. There are groups that want to help people to improve their lives. They are dedicated to improving people's lives, but they miss the opportunity to bring together two very important concepts. One is that in order to drive change in people's lives, we need to understand that it's going to start with that individual and empowering that individual to improve their own life. We have to remove the internal and external barriers that are there for those individuals, but it's got to be something that's driven by the individual tapping into their unique gifts and talents to create value for others, contribute to others, and drive change in their life. But secondly, and I think there are a lot of people that get that empowerment piece right, but they miss the fact that there are so many barriers to people's opportunities, right? Whether they're cultural or institutional. This country has a unique history of institutional problems that need to be overcome, whether they be institutional racism or criminal justice or other things that our country has faced throughout our history. Those are real barriers, and generational poverty are real barriers to opportunity. So while it starts with the individual, it starts with empowerment, it requires us and our communities to step up and drive change. We've got to invest in ways that those barriers are overcome and drive change in individuals' lives and drive change in our country. It's going to require, you hear a lot of nonsense right now in public, in the media, in our country, a lot of discord and division. But I'll tell you what I'm excited about and optimistic about when I hear some of that nonsense. I'm excited that there's an opportunity to bring people together around a positive vision for change. And the folks that can bring people together around that positive vision for change are in this room right now. So if we can have a productive couple of days together, we can begin to heal our country and drive forward and transform lives and transform our country in the process.